Hey guys, back again for a bit of an update. Like always, it's been a little while since I've done one of these. I've probably all been watching the episodes coming out each week on Wednesday. A lot of that footage is just footage I've been collecting throughout the whole build, so it's pretty old now. It's time to do some new footage. We're catching up. I've almost run out of the archive footage. So where we're at is I'm probably just over halfway through wiring. The PDM is all wired up. So the PDM got wired into here, into this junction box. I've got the VNet connector coming through the front of the box here. That runs back to our well, it actually runs up, and in here this is my T-piece where I've got a Bluetooth adapter, the universal CAN module, and then this one runs over to where the dash will be mounted, to the roast pack dash. The universal CAN module, I've just got it rough here at the moment. You can kind of see it in here. This is what allows us to talk to the ECU on the CAN bus. So I can't remember whether I've done a bit of an update on the ECU, but obviously we've changed ECUs. We're running a Emtron KV8. There was a previous video where we were going to run a big stuff 3 ECU, but after some research I found it not to be quite exactly what we need. It would have run the motor no problem at all, but not really for this application. Small drag racing, high horsepower drag racing application. It didn't have the functionality of the Emtron. The Emtron basically is the equivalent of a Motec M1. It's probably better than that in some cases. It's got 120. Let me have a look here. I'll tell you the specs on it. So this is it here, the Emtron KV8. So we've got dual 100 megahertz processors, 500 megs of DDR RAM, 32 meg of ECU data logging, over 1200 channels available at a 1 to 500 hertz logging rate. It's got a built-in 4-channel oscilloscope. We've got onboard barometric pressure sensor, 3-axis accelerometer with 16-bit resolution. We have 8-port injection, 8 ignition outputs, 16 auxiliary outputs. We can switch lower high side. We've got half bridge drivers. There really is a lot in this. We've got 16 analog voltage temperature inputs, 8 digital speed inputs, 6 digital switched inputs, we've got an ignition switch input, 2 crank sync inputs. Back to the speed inputs, this thing can read your ABS sensors, your Hall, your what's the other one? Is it reluctor? It can read them all. That's one of the reasons why we went away from the big stuff. There's, in drag racing, officially traction control isn't allowed, and for that reason the big stuff through, although it did have a way of doing that, it wasn't something that was going to work for us. It was based on time over basically a 60 foot. We've got dual lambda control, we've got knock control, got auxiliary inputs. We've got 2 5-volt sensor supplies, 1 8-volt sensor supply. We've got 2 0-volts sensor supplies, or grounds, if you want to call them that. So yeah, it's a pretty badass ECU. Uses the super seal connectors, 2 26 pin and 2 34 pin. So I've started the wiring of the ECU. This is the last of the flying harnesses. This is my I think it's A. Yep. So I've just been going through getting them ready to split, and then these will run out to all the sensors on the engine and the auxiliary sensors that I'm adding in. Got a fuel pressure sensor, there's a gearbox pressure sensor, transmission temp, rear diff temp, power steering temp. There's some of the auxiliary sensors we've put in, and then obviously you just got all your standard engine sensors. So yeah, that's the ECU that we're running anyway. It's getting mounted up there under the dash. Yeah, I had to get the race pack universal CAN module to talk to it, so that's why we've done that. But yeah, so that's happening there. We've had to put a relay box in just in here. As much as I tried to have everything controlled by the PDM, some things just can't. I wasn't going to go and buy another PDM just for a few more relays. So plus the relay that feeds the power to the ECU, it's a little bit different. It's got a diode built into it. It's one of these if you can see that. This one's made by Bosch, and the reason for the diode I can't really tell you off the top of my head. I have read it. It's got something to do with if there's a fault, because when the power's off or under a fault condition the ECU switches to ground. If you don't have that diode, you can backfeed the power supply and essentially fry your ECU. So pretty important when you're yeah, so we've run that, we've got that in there. But yeah, we've everything's running the Deutsch connectors. This is all wired back from the PDM. I've got these, I can't remember how many pins these are, 8. I've got these 2-pin plugs here. These are actually, if in the future I want to tap into any of the spare channels in the PDM, instead of having to break into any of the loom, I can just plug into these. So I ran the spare channels to these two plugs, and if we have to use them for any reason, can just plug into it essentially and go from there. So yeah, progress has been a bit slow on the old race truck. Had a few other commitments, but we are getting there. You can see on the back here, again, because the PDM, the race pack smart wire, it only has a maximum continuous current of, I think it's 120 amps, which isn't a great deal when you're trying to run a race truck. So on the back down here I've got a solid state MSD relay, 4-channel relay, and this is actually switched via the PDM, but it's powered straight from the battery, so we're not, although we're switching it using the PDM logic, we're not actually taking up any of that capacity. So we're switching our big thermos with that. In here we're running a Cartec solid state isolator. I've still got to run out the isolating wires, the push buttons. So there's a push button that goes in the center of the dash, and then there's one on the outside of the car. And one's a normally open and one's a normally closed circuit. And the idea behind that is the normally closed circuit goes on the outside of the car, and if you're in a big crash and say you sideswipe a tree, that circuit is going to get ripped open and go open circuit and will shut the car down. With that being said, hopefully that doesn't go against us, because you tend to lose a lot of panels on one of these things. So probably mount that on the door, generally keep the doors on. So yeah, that's going to get mounted on the outside, so if you're in a big crash and that gets ripped off, it'll instantly kill the battery. Otherwise the one inside is actually normally closed, and when you push it, it goes normally open. What else has been happening? Not a great deal, to be honest. I've been wiring this thing for a few weeks now, and it's painful. So everything's basically fully waterproof. Everything's run in single wall heat shrink, and then on the ends it's dual wall or glue filled heat shrink to seal it off, which means hopefully there's no mistakes, because you're never getting into it again. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to quickly show you is on these super seal connectors, if you haven't done it before. Let's just pop it here. Now, with these, I brought the flying harness set mainly because I was a bit lazy and I didn't want to have to go and buy a million different rolls of cable. Plus, you know, whatever they're going to give you is going to be a good quality motorsport cabling loom. So one of the things I've been doing is we've been de-pinning these plugs, because obviously I'm not using all the capabilities of this ECU to start off with, and there is quite a few, because these are just a generic flying harness, there's quite a few cores in here that we don't need, and rather than have cables tied up under the dash somewhere, it's easy enough to, if we need them later on, just to put them back in. So I'm de-pinning these. And after a bit of searching, I got these cable schedules, and I've gone through already, and this particular loom A doesn't actually do too much for me. It literally just has my 2 lambdas or wideband sensor sensors on it, and everything else is going to get pulled out. So the other thing I suppose I forgot to mention was with the Emtron KV8, that's designed for an 8 injection car. They do a KV6, 8, 12 and 16. And one of the things I asked when I was inquiring about this ECU was, if I wire this car up based on the KV8 and later on down the track I want to go to a KV16 because we win lotto and the rules change in the world of motorsport and we can run turbocharged V8s where I need another lot of injectors. I asked them if they're wired the same, and basically the answer I got was yeah, they are. So it would just be a matter of unplugging my loom and plugging in the new ECU and just adding in the injectors that I wouldn't have used, and obviously updating the engine tune to incorporate the extra injectors and ignition drivers. So that's pretty cool, I thought, to be able to do that. So it's not a full rewire, just to upgrade, you know. So something to think about. Pretty good idea. But yeah, anyway, getting back to the super seals, if you haven't done these before, to de-pin them, it's pretty easy. You don't really even need a tool. If you don't, if you've got long nails, you definitely don't need a tool, but I don't. So you'll see on there, you've got a big white line. Let me get it in there a bit close for you. So there's a big side and two little tabs. Now this is the locking mechanism. Now on the big side, if you just put a bit of pressure on there, you'll hear that click. And basically what that means now is we can pull on these pins, and with a bit of wiggle them around, they'll actually just pull out. So I'm just going to pull a couple of these out. Now when you look on the back of the plug, you're not going to be able to see it on the camera, but it's labelled. There's a few labels in there numbering it from pin 1 through to, this is a 26 pin connector. So you can get your bearing, and I can see from my cable schedule that I don't need pin 1, so it's that simple. Just pull straight out like that. Pins, I've actually got to pull quite a few of these out. So pins 1, 2, So guys, in other news, I brought myself a truck to transport this thing around when it's finished, and I've been looking at turning it into a bit of a motorhome setup. I think when I do all that, I'll probably do a bit of a video series on that. I've just been doing lots of research on solar panels and charging systems, and I've got to tell you, there's a fair bit in it. For those that don't know, I'm actually a Sparky. I'm not actually a fabricator by trade, would you believe it? And there is a lot to know about 12 volt systems, especially when it comes to solar panels. If any of you know a bit about that, maybe comment in, give me a heads up on how it all works, because oh look, I'm looking through it and I'm getting there, but there's a lot to know. My latest idea is, it looks like you can buy house solar panels for a fraction of the price of a 12 volt dedicated solar panel, and surely you can get a solar regulator that regulates the high voltage down to 12 volt. So that's the path I'm looking at, because I can only see benefits by having a high voltage. You're going to have less volt drop, which means we can run smaller cables to the panels. Smaller cables mean cheaper wiring, because 12 volts bloody expensive. You I think just the battery cable in this car here, to run from the battery to the starter motor, that was like nearly $300, just so you can carry the amps over the distance, and it's not even a long distance. So the beauty of high voltage is, by upping the voltage, we can we don't have to carry as many amps for the same amount of voltage. Now, before I get too carried away, where am I up to? I'm up to 6, 7. Oh yeah, they can come out too. So yeah, so I don't want to do maths on the fly, but what I'm talking about is, say if you've got something that's, say you got a 120 watt appliance, or you've got a solar panel, it's 120 watts. Well, at 12 volts, that means that it can put out, it's watts over voltage equals your amps. So that means it's going to give you 10 amps. Is that right? $120 watt over 12, 10. Now, if you had 120 watt over 24, you can supply or transfer that amperage that solar panel is going to be producing at a lower current rate, and it's going to be about half. It's going to be like 6. Sometimes these get stuck, and you kind of got to twist them a little bit and then just give them another heave. But there you go. So I've pulled out that first row. 7. How many more have I got? I've got 2 more. I need to pull out 8 and 9. Literally on this pin, on this plug, is just the 2 lambdas, or the 2 wideband. So I'm not leaving much. Like I was saying about if you had, say, a KV16 you would be leaving these in, because pin 1 through to 7 is injectors 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and obviously I'm not using them, so I'm pulling them out. And you can actually buy little blanks that go in here, but I'm not bothering with that. I don't think we're going to get water unless we drive it into a lake, which I don't intend to. So 8 and 9, they're gone. 8 and 9. So we need to get rid of 12, 14 and 15. So, what else can I say? Not much. We'll just leave it there, I think. But, oh, actually, before I do that, so to lock the super seal back up on the top, the two little tabs, now that I've pushed down on the big tab, they've actually stuck out. And to lock it back up, you just push them back in, and that's it, job done. So guys, yeah, thanks for watching. Try and be a bit more prepared next week. I'm going to have to start, like I said, I've run out of all my archive footage, so I've got to start doing some actual camera work. So if you want to know anything about the truck, now's your chance. Write in the comments, ask some questions, I'll do a video on it, no problem. If there's anything in particular you want to know more about, yeah, so hopefully in the next week or so I'll finish this wiring off, and then probably do a video on me trying to program everything up, which is going to be fun. Yeah, but yeah, it's getting pretty close. Like, I've got the wiring to do, we've got to program all the wiring, I need to organise a drive shaft, the steering servo came back from Power Steering Solutions in the States. Charlie did us a major solid and upgraded my steering servo for no cost, because I've got his Power Steering Solutions steering rack, which is a beautiful rack. Let's have a look at the rack. So I was running their rack, and I had purchased what I thought was the correct steering servo. So this is the rack in here. And in everything all the steering systems I've ever dealt with, I've always used -6, and on the rack here it had -8 fittings on it, you see, which are huge. And the steering servo I'd brought had -6 fittings on it, like I would have expected it to. And so I hit Charlie up on Facebook there. For those that don't know, this is what the steering servo looks like. Right, this allows you to have mechanical steering to the. So that steering rack is a mechanical rack and pinion with a hydraulic ram on top, which hydraulically assists by about 99% the steering. So it's basically hydraulic steering with a mechanical backup, because I tell you what, it's almost impossible to steer it based on pure mechanical. It's really, really heavy. But anyway, this is a steering servo. It's got a spline in and a spline out. So on one end you have your steering wheel attaching to one end, and the other end goes into the back of the rack. And then you have your hydraulic lines coming from your hydraulic steering pump and whatnot in and out. I won't go too much into it, but basically this is the one that I purchased, and Charlie at PSS, he said, so getting back to the story, so like I had the -6 one and I put it out there. I asked on the on Facebook, and they got back to me right away and they asked me what I've got, and I said, oh look, I've got your rack, and I explained, you know, and I sent him some photos. I said, this is the steering servo I've got, this is the pump I've got, you know, what's the go? Have I do I need to change the fittings on the rack down to -6, or what's the go? And he explained to me that, as a lot of you probably already know, not many people make a lot of videos about these trophy trucks. They're all a bit secret squirrel, and there's not a lot of info out there. And I didn't know that there is a specific trophy truck steering valve, and they're not listed. You can't, when you go and look online, they're not listed. That's how secret squirrel they are. So I had purchased the wrong one, but he said, no worries, we actually are one of the companies that can modify them to the full flow that they need to be, and upgrade it to the -8, because basically when you get to a trophy truck, you run a full flow pump, and if you were to run the full flow through the -6, you end up blowing out the inside here. There's a torsion valve, and you wreck it or something like that. So anyway, long story short, this is a special trophy truck one that they don't even advertise unless you know that they exist, and then you can ring them up and ask for one. And yeah, Charlie was a champion about it, and he said, no dramas, you know, you're running one of our racks, we want it to work properly and how it should. Send me your pump and I'll sort it out for you. So I paid for the shipping and he sent it back, and this is the new pump, all fixed up, all ready to go. And he did all that for me for nothing, which is bloody good service if you ask me. You know, I didn't buy the servo from him, and yet he wanted to make sure that I'm going to have the best steering that we're going to get out of this rack. So if you watch this, Charlie, thanks mate, you're yeah, exceeded my expectations. So yeah, anyway guys, this video is getting a bit long, so we'll stop it there. Remember, videos coming out on Wednesday. It's 9 o'clock Western Australian time, whatever that is. And yeah, share the videos around to your mates if you think they're going to like it, and hit that subscribe and follow button. Alright, thanks guys.